This webinar is part of the TaRL series of webinars on building communities of practice and education. TaRL is an educational research program funded with UK International Development. Its implementation is led by Oxford Policy Management in partnership with 𝐖𝐞𝐛𝐢𝐧𝐚𝐫 Institute for Educational Development and Science Savers. It is dedicated towards enhancing Pakistan's education system through high-quality research and promoting evidence-based policy making. So before we begin the webinar, I would like to share some ground rules. You may use the chat box, which is active, to share your comments respectfully and your queries, which will be addressed towards the last segment of the webinar. And we will have a dedicated Q&A session. Also, do not forget to scan the QR code, which will be visible during the last couple of slides, to share your feedback with us about the webinar. So coming to today's webinar, today's topic, TaRL. So Pakistan continues to face a significant foundational learning challenge. National assessments often show that many children in primary grades are unable to read with comprehension or perform basic numeracy tasks. Addressing this challenge requires solutions that are practical, scalable, and grounded in evidence. Today's webinar focuses on teaching at the right level, which is a globally acclaimed pedagogical approach that assesses children's actual learning levels, grouping them according to their competencies rather than according to grades. And it provides targeted instruction to help children catch up on foundational skills. So today's discussion will explore the evidence, implementation experience, and policy implications for scaling TaRL across Sindh and beyond within Pakistan. So I would now like to introduce our distinguished speakers, and let me just change the slide. Okay, so we have with us, our panel includes the very Honorable Dr. Fawzia Khan, who is the Chief Executive Advisor, Curriculum Wing, School Education and Literacy Department, Sindh. Dr. Khan is a distinguished educationist and policy leader with over 27 years of experience advancing education reforms in Pakistan. She has led transformative initiatives in early childhood education, foundational learning, digital education, child protection, and inclusive education in partnership with organizations such as UNICEF, UNESCO, the World Bank, USAID, JICA, and FCDO. Our second panelist is Ms. Bela Raza Jamil. The very inspirational Ms. Bela is a leading public policy specialist and education reformer and recipient of the 2023 Yidan Prize for Educational Development, serving as CEO of Idare Talimo Agahi, ITA. She leads major national initiatives in foundational learning, girls' education, and education system reform, including the annual Status of Education Report, ASER, in Pakistan. She's the founder of Pakistan's Learning Festival. She also serves on several national and global education platforms, advocating for equitable, inclusive, and quality education for all. Finally, on our panelists, we have the very capable Ms. 𝐞𝐛𝐢𝐧𝐚𝐫 Abbasi, who is a manager, special initiatives, and foundation learning systems at ITA. 𝐞𝐛𝐢𝐧𝐚𝐫 is an education professional and Fulbright scholar with an MEd from Harvard University and 7+ years of experience designing and scaling child-centered education programs across Pakistan. So now let's dive into this exciting discussion. So Ms. Bela Raza Jamil, thank you so much for joining us today, all the way from Senegal. Let's begin with you. So TaRL has been implemented in many contexts globally. What makes the Sindh experience particularly significant for Pakistan's education system? Over to you.
Thank you very much. And it's a very exciting time, as I said, for Pakistan, where foundation learning is on fire right now and is being led by the government. But so for us, the phase one, as I say, of this particular phase was immediately after the floods in 2022. And within 1 month of the flood, we insisted at ITA, how about if we do recovery of foundational learning in the flood affected areas? And we call TaRL also Chalo Padho Badho. And Shikarpur and Ghotki, with the agreement of the Sindh government and the School Education Literacy Department, they identified the 391 schools in the two districts to reach 30,845 students. But the most important part of this was that here, because of the situation of the floods and emergencies, we decided, and teachers were all scattered, and this was just done as an emergency measure, almost at the time of relief, not recovery, in fact. We took on community teachers. These were community teachers from the same communities where the children were coming from. And I think what was exciting is that we looked at the possibility of doing it rapidly and at scale even then. And that then I think, and Dr. Fawzia and the SELD were focal persons at the district level and the provincial levels monitoring this, including a village-based TaRL as well, 100%. And we thought, if we can do that, then in 2025, again, when we saw heavy floods and rains come, we requested if we can look at this in 2024. And SELD by then was saying, why not then use our teachers? And this scaling TaRL in the mainstream system is a big shift. You are using not just the schools, the head teachers are the leaders of this initiative, all by the teachers of SELD in those same schools, and within and everything of TaRL, whether it was compliance on content, on teacher manuals, on EMIS systems, was all approved by the School Education Literacy Department. Now, why it matters for the education system is that you are looking at proof at scale in a very low resource context. Often people say, yeah, this cannot happen because it's so expensive, that this is, somebody else will have to do it. And we wanted to see, can this be done in a low resource context by the government teachers? The legitimacy of the government is so critical, but at the same time, imagine that in 2024, the policy on Sindh early childhood care and education and FL took place, and it was almost like the implementation of the policy. We often say that there's a big policy and implementation gap. Well, here was again something which was being done in the government schools in tough districts and by the government teachers. And we see that in the Global Education Evidence Advisory Panel, which is a global panel, and what we saw also, because about 8 government officials, senior government officials, went to Sobral in Brazil to look at the South-South learning options. And these are all good practices which were part of the replicable architecture and for other provinces as well. I think that's what makes it so vibrant and interesting, is that now this is part of the architecture of the government systems. It's not like an NGO is doing it. Our role was really technical, more of a catalyst, more supportive, more, as a coach whenever needed. So I think that's the power of something like this. And if you go to the next slide, you will see that these numbers and what happened. When things work, you need to see the evidence, and the hard evidence in the emergency response, as I mentioned, the North Sindh districts, 381 schools, more than 30,000 students, we saw a 48% improvement in foundational skills. Now, this is schools where 90% of the children were in bad states, of being able to do this is grade 2 to 5. But this was a community-led model, and community teachers were there. But it was good for proof of concept. But when you look at the scaling within the mainstream systems, with the teachers from Karachi West and Umarkot, both again very low resource context. One, a desert with my majority as minority groups, Hindu community there, and Karachi West with large migrant multi-ethnic communities, again looking at almost 223 schools, the headmistresses of the schools, more than 20,000 students, and four cohorts taking place one after the other in a normal school academic year, where teachers and head teachers happily adjusted to what would be seen as TaRL, not in a summer school context, but a regular academic program where they thought for at least Sindhi, Urdu, English, and maths, the children could at least improve their basic three subjects. Now, those three subjects are your fundamental subjects on which every other learning rests. So you are looking at foundational learning and foundational learning at a very solid level to test it out in the system, in the government systems. Now, across Pakistan, I think this is perhaps the first one where we've used government systems in throughout the academic year. Happen, as I said, that with head teachers accepting it, with the DOs accepting it, with the school education literacy department enabling it. Without that level of ownership, this wouldn't have taken place. I think we are at a tipping point, and tipping point, within mainstream systems, where I think we can begin to see all of this scaling up. I'll stop there and then see, how the questions come in, and my other colleagues will support this.
Thank you so much for that information as well. Very helpful. And I think it brings us to the next query. We have Dr. Fawzia Khan with us. Thank you so much for joining us. So we would like to learn from you what policy and system level changes are needed to sustain and institutionalize approaches such as TaRL within the education sector. Over to you, Dr. Fawzia.
Thank you so much, sir. So I think the most important message from Sindh TaRL experience is that effective learning interventions cannot remain as projects, right? So if you want TaRL to truly improve foundational learning at scale, so it has to move from being an externally supported intervention to becoming part of the education system itself. And in Sindh, we already have a very strong starting point, the Sindh ECCE and Foundational Learning Policy 2024, and similarly the Sindh Education Sector Plan and Roadmap 2025-30. So basically these provides the policy foundations for us. So the first system level change is formal policy alignment, and TaRL should not be treated as an extra activity, a remedial camp, or a donor supported add-on. So it needs to have a clear place in the academic calendar and the school timetable, and school should know when it will happen, so how long it will run and how it connects with regular teaching and learning. The second major requirement is institutionalized capacity building. So one of the strongest achievement of this model is that we are not relying only on the external trainers, STADA, which is our Sindh Teacher Education Development Authority. So they have endorsed the TaRL training manuals, and we now have government master trainers within the system, and similarly we have our own trained teachers also within the system. So this is a very, I think, valuable asset. And going forward, institutions like Provincial Institute of Teacher Education or our TTI's district structures and school clusters must become the long-term delivery vehicles for trainings. Similarly for mentoring, refresher support, and quality assurance also. So if capacity remains outside the government system, the program will remain dependent on partners. But if capacity sits inside the system, TaRL can, survive leadership changes, funding cycles, and project timelines. The third and perhaps the most critical change is financing. And for sustainability, foundational learning and TaRL need dedicated and protected budget lines. guidelines. And we have already seen endorsement at the Alternative Learning Solution Forum in January 2026 and the Technical Working Group in May 2026. But endorsement must now move into budget execution. And without financing, I think each new cohort will require fresh negotiations, and implementation will continue to depend on donors' availability. So a protected budget line gives the system ownership, predictability, and the ability to plan ahead. The fourth requirement is assessment and data integration. TaRL works because it starts from the child's actual learning level, not simply from the grade level. So the baseline, midline, endline assessment, grouping, regrouping, targeted instructions are central to the model. Our Directorate of Curriculum Assessment and Research has already endorsed the assessment tools which were developed under the initiative mentioned by Bela. So, but the next step is to integrate these tools into SELD, EMIS, and accountability system or the monitoring systems. So, once this is done, foundational learning data can become part of a routine decision making at schools, district, and provincial level. So, this will also allow us to identify which school needs support, where learning gaps are highest, and which districts are progressing. The fifth change is whole of school integration. Evidence from this round of implementation shows very clearly that schools with active HMs performed better. So this means that TaRL cannot be seen as the responsibility of only one trained teacher. It has to become a school-wide strategy led by the head teachers, supported by the teachers, and monitored by the district or MNE, or for that matter, the school management committees also. So this is why the three-level system architecture is so important. So at the provincial level, the system must ensure policy, financing, assessment standards, EMIS integration, and accountability under the sector plan. And I think at the district level, we need regular DEC coordination, monitoring, mentoring, data review, retention of trained human resources. And at the school level, we need empowered head teachers and trained teachers, regular assessment cycles, peer learning, and community engagement. So my key point is that the institutional foundation in Sindh already exists. We have policy alignment, we have endorsed tools, trained government, human resources already available, coordination forums, and strong evidence from implementation. So what is now needed is the next step. Protected financing for sure, EMI's integration, teacher recognition mechanism, and full transition of implementation ownership into the government system. So if we do this, I think TaRL will not remain a successful pilot. It can become a sustained foundational learning strategy for Sindh and potentially a model for other provinces in Pakistan. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Saiba.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fazia. That is excellent and remarkable and sounds great and very encouraging for the educationists in Pakistan and all the researchers, those who promote TaRL. So basically, coming to you, Kanza Abbasi, you have been on ground and you have been involved in the entire process of implementing this program in Sindh. So can you share some of the key findings and learning outcomes from this TaRL implementation in Sindh? And for this, I'm going to change the slide. Yeah.
Yes, thank you
Over
so
to you,
much.
Kanza.
Thank you so much, Sahar. So I'm very excited to share some of the key learning outcomes that we observed during the implementation of this intervention across two districts, Karachi West and Umarkot. And as you can see here, we have three main subject areas that we cover. So one is the native language. So for Karachi West, it was the Urdu context, Urdu medium schools, and then for Umarkot, it was the Sindhi context, so Sindhi medium schools. So that's the one language portion that's covered, and then we have English, of course, and then numeracy. And how we interpret these results is in two ways. The two most simplest ways to interpret these results is looking at the decline in the most primal levels of foundational literacy and numeracy, and then the rise in the more advanced levels. So in Urdu and Sindhi, the more primal basic levels included beginner level, which means that the child could not even identify a single letter or for a set of letters and one digit number. And in the letter level, it said that they could identify some letters or some one-digit alphabets. And in the advanced levels, it indicates that the child can read stories and sentences, and they can comprehend those stories. And in numeracy, they can do subtraction and two-digit division. So those were the more advanced levels of foundational literacy and numeracy. Now, as you can see here, in the graphs, you can see that in the more primal levels for Urdu and Sindhi, for example, let's take that, um, we had around 46% students that were at those levels, the more basic levels. And then at the end line level, that number dropped to around 14%. And in the more advanced levels, the baseline results showed that we had around 31% kids who were at sentence and story level. And then at the end line level, that figure rose to around 62%. Similarly, in English, at the sentence and story level, which is again the advanced level, at baseline, we had 31% of students who could read sentences and stories and comprehend it. And then at the end line level, that figure rose to around 50%. And in numeracy, again, we're looking at, if we look at the advanced levels, so at the baseline level, they were around 30% kids who could do subtraction or two-digit division. And then at the end line level, that figure again rose to 70%. So we saw substantial learning gains throughout those four cohorts in both of the districts and Umarkot and Karachi West. Now let's, if we can move to the next slide, I want to also show some disaggregated data. So gender disaggregated and district-wise data as well to see what the learning gains look like across those two districts and the two genders. So if we look at the gender disaggregated data, so we had around 54% boys and 46% girls within the 20,000 population of kids. And in Urdu and Sindhi literacy, both the boy and the girl students showed strong improvement from baseline to end line. But among the girl students, the beginner and the letter level, which is the more, again, basic levels, reduced from 43% to 14%, around that figure. And then the sentence and the story level rose from 34% to 63%. And among boys, again, the basic levels reduced from around 48% to 14%, and then the more advanced levels rose from 28% to around 61% at inline. So this shows that both boys and girls moved substantially out of the lower literacy levels, with girls ending slightly higher in the story level as compared to boys. And if you look at English literacy, it's around basically the same. We see similar results, but it's around 2 percentage points higher for girls at the advanced level. So we see that the girls increased in advanced levels from 16%, around 16% to around 51%, and the boys increased from around 11% to around 49%. So girls ended slightly higher at the story level again in English. In numeracy, it's flipped. So again, boys performed slightly better than girls, not very substantially. Again, the percentage point difference is around 2 at the advanced level. So the girls rose and their advanced levels from around 29% to 69, and the boys rose from around 31 to around 71%. So overall, numeracy gains were very, very strong for both genders. So this is just a little bit of information on the gender disaggregated data. And if we were to look at the data from Karachi West to Umarkot, now what's very meaningful about this result is that the Karachi West shows us the urban context and Umarkot shows us the rural context. So it gives us very important information about the patterns in which progress was observed in their foundational literacy and numeracy levels. So in Urdu and Sindhi, again, Karachi West ended slightly higher at story level, so at 38.9%, and Umarkot rose to around 36.8%. And in English, again, Karachi West had a bit of an advantage. So they again held a small story level advantage at around 25.4%, with Umarkot at 22.3%. Now, these are the advanced levels for both of these subjects. In mathematics, however, Umarkot performed better. So overall, the advanced numeracy was higher for Umarkot at around 71.9%, and Karachi West, at the advanced levels, we had around 68.5 kids who could do subtraction and two-digit division. So these are the learning outcomes. So we showed you the overall learning outcomes for all 4 cohorts in the entire academic year. And then we had gender disaggregated and urban versus rural outcomes as well.
Thank you so much. Very interesting results, Kansa. Thank you for sharing them. And we would also like to understand what sort of implementation challenges emerged during the program, and what lessons have been learned for future scale-up efforts. So over to you again, Kansa.
Yes, thank you so much for that question. So we learned a lot. And the advantage of implementing several cohorts within one academic year, we kind of sort of figured out a strategy or an optimal strategy for the implementation of teaching at the right level that works for the system. So the advantage of teaching at the right level, this methodology, is that it sort of bends to the system, or it adapts to the system or the context that it is implemented in, instead of the system having to adjust, right? So what we found out was our first cohort, which was implemented in August and September, which was right after the summer break. We found that that's when we had the most gains, and that's when we had like a lot of momentum and motivation as well. So not only was it the best performing cohort, despite some of the disruptions that occurred, but there was a lot of motivation within the students and the teachers to learn. Some of the challenges that came up for latter cohorts, and I would say cohort 2 was the most challenged for us, is some of the holidays had been extended. There were some teacher strikes that came about as well. There were heavy sort of rains or sort of climate situations like extreme heat in Umarkot, especially, or extreme cold during the winter break, that sort of introduced some disruptions. But what we found out that the most optimal window for the implementation for teaching at the right level is right after summer break, which is the August-September timeline, and then right after final exams or the new academic year, which is around April-May time. So there were some challenges there as well due to the austerity measures, but we can sort of we can say very confidently that that would be a really good time to implement teaching at the right level, because a new academic year is beginning. We have higher attendance at that time, and teacher motivation is quite high as well. And we also leveraged the district education group meetings, which are regular meets where district education officials from each of the district sort of met and talked about not just teaching at the right level, but a lot of interventions that are happening in schools. So that sort of appeared to us as a very useful, a very meaningful platform to maintain the implementation and uphold sort of monitoring and accountability mechanisms. And we also did an orientation for the headmasters as well, because we found out through a case study sort of analysis, that where we had the most uh, favorable buy-in from the headmaster, that's where our kids performed better. The school kids performed better because the teachers felt supported by the HM. So the buy-in of the headmasters, in addition to, of course, the district education officials, is extremely important. So those were some of the challenges, but then also mitigation strategies and overall operational sort of strategy that we have learned about throughout this implementation cycle. I think if you move to the next slide, we have some lessons for scale. Yes, thank you. We have some lessons for scale up as well. So a lot of these, Dr. Fawzia already talked about, they were extremely important, and this was all government led, right? So it's all the effort of all of our school teachers, district education officials, and the students as well. They were just so excited by it. One of the things that I want to highlight here is the opportunity for peer learning. So, how in another way that teaching at the right level was adapted in this context was, normally teaching at the right level is not for kids who are already at the advanced stage. But what we found out was that figure, the percentage of kids who were at the advanced stage, was quite low. And it's not like our context allowed us or the teachers to separate those kids. So that was used as a very good opportunity, and that was suggested by the school teachers themselves, is to integrate them into the camp, into the TaRL intervention, and they sort of led some of the activities. So the peer learning aspect of this implementation actually showed us a lot of gains as well, and that's what got all of the kids excited and all of the teachers excited. So again, we were bending to the system, or we were adapting to the system instead of asking the system to adapt to TaRL. And institutional capacity is there. So master training, a training of master trainers was already done, and that was done through the nomination of PITE master trainers. And then we have a cohort of around 560 teachers who are now fully trained in teaching at the right level. So the retention of those officials, of those individuals, very important stakeholders, is going to sustain the implementation of teaching at the right level post the project and cycle as well. And then, of course, sustaining those forums, those platforms like the district education group, to sort of maintain the fidelity, to maintain the accountability mechanisms of this implementation as well. There are other sort of points here noted, as you can see on the slide as well, about the timings and the curricular load. A lot of that I covered in the previous slide, and Dr. Fawzia as well. But these were some of the key sort of findings, the lessons that we learned that I wanted to just share here. I'll just stop here to see if there's any questions or if anyone wants to come in.
Yes, thank you so much, Kanza. Very informative. Thank you so much for sharing those lessons with us. And coming to the feedback and Q&A, we're going to just arrive at it in a while. So, Ms. Bela, coming back to you. So we have all this emerging evidence. Now, what does this evidence tell us about the potential of TaRL to address learning poverty in the context of Pakistan?
Well, I think most importantly, I think Dr. Fawzia covered things so brilliantly. I think that's important. We have two sets of problems. We have a very big problem of children in school and not learning. And then we have a problem of children out of school, those who are never enrolled and overage, and those who may have dropped out. In either case, it presents a great solution to the issue of learning, which is fundamental to any system. And I think so. Here is something homegrown now, something that now we don't have, non-governmental actors saying, okay, this is a solution. Now we have lots of witnesses, lots of practitioners within systems. And as long as we have that to be able to multiply, that I think, we have reasons to hold up our heads and think that, yes, this can be scaled up. every aspect of this particular piece of work has been completely led by the government and stamped by the government, practiced by the government. And we as a civil society organization always in sort of being the always the frontliners are doing it, held ourselves back to just facilitate and coach and be there and collect the evidence very rigorously so that at least we invest in that. I think we need, and I'm happy to say with so many people listening, and in every province of Pakistan now, TaRL initiatives are going on. The question for us is, are we looking at the data? Are we being rigorous on the baseline, midline, endline? Have we made that formative assessment part of the system? Can teachers, as they did here, every child had a unique ID. Every child has his or her own learning pathway. The teacher knew where Khadim was at, the first week of Khadim was in the 10th week or the 7th week. And the teacher had the liberty to move the children according to their level, not age and grade, but according to the level of learning. Now, these things that we often hear as theory and somebody saying, this happens, but in low cost we created a high impact possibility, but not we as ITA, we, I think, the government and the government system. And we saw that in these very complex contexts, I tell you, it was one of the most exciting parts when I went to Orangi. And in Orangi, there is one particular para or one area, which is called in those old days NWFP para, right? And which means there are a lot of Pashto speaking children there. And the teachers were also Pashto by just chance. And it was great to see the teachers and the students doing TaRL for Urdu in Pashto, scaffolding with the mother tongue, and it worked brilliantly. Now, those are things that we need to invest in. I think we have very rich evidence, and I think the government has to be I am very proud of the fact that, here, what we had always dreamed of, we are seeing more and more government. We've had the same experience in Balochistan, in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in Punjab with the Impact program. Things are beginning to move with the Talim program, but I really want to caution that the Sindh government, with the conditions of climate change, doing it in the summer, in the height of summer when people migrate because of heat and climate change crisis, one, it's better to do this during the school academic year rather than in summer, and that too immediately after the summer break begins in June maybe. But because then again they will have 1 month or 8 weeks without school. So if we can do it as a remedial program, as we saw in Sobral in Brazil, Dr. Fawzia was there, it was just seen as a routine. And here also in the whole school approach in Sindh that we are talking about, the teachers, about 4 teachers or 3 teachers per school, it was a whole school approach. Almost every teacher has been trained in this. So the teachers can use it, do the remedial, bring the child back into the mainstream, but it is a mainstream program. The data is there and its data is there for everyone. And I'm happy that DRRC is, as a great facilitator of data and research and so much work which is now being done on FL. And of course, the technical working group of 2 technical working groups that Dr. Fawzia was hosting and chairing. We had twice teachers and head teachers come to share. Dr. Fawzia, it wasn't that so, that they shared what they felt. They enjoyed the flexibility of the pedagogy. They thought that children were happy. They were not sad or stern. And parents couldn't believe it that the children are not taking holidays. They would otherwise, absenteeism would be big in children. And it is so in Sindh. But here, even for marriages, they were not wanting to stay extra days. They wanted to come back to the classroom because they were enjoying themselves. It'll be great to see if we can track these children and to see what has happened and to continue this program. That's what I think we want is system, scale, and that's how this particular program was designed, very rapid. I think not even 14 months. So there are big possibilities because I think in Sindh now, all the programs have a TaRL component. In the new World Food Program, which is bringing in the intersectionality of um, nutrition, health, hygiene, and foundational learning, I think those are great stories to be able to hang on to and to get see if in that exercise that we do, which is at the intersection of high levels of poverty and deprivation where FL comes in, whether we can also now have FL which has looking at children with disabilities and doing FL as well. Would love to see if we can collaborate with the government on those aspects where children who are most likely to be excluded, how they cope with this. Just like we're looking at the most vulnerable, we must also look at the most excluded, especially children with disabilities who happen to be in school. Maybe that's what we need to do. And most importantly, take it to scale. It is very low cost, but the
Thank
results
you
are
so
great.
much. Right. I think that is excellent advice. Thank you for sharing that. And that takes us to the next point about scaling such interventions. Dr. Fawzia, a question for you with your rich experience and practical know-how. What main recommendations, like, highlights, would you offer to three groups: policymakers, practitioners, and development partners who are interested in scaling effective learning interventions such as TaL? Over to you, Dr. Fazia.
Thank you so much, Sar. So I think very difficult question, but yeah. So based on the Sindh experience, I would offer recommendation for three groups: the policymakers, practitioners, development partners, and so each group has a different role, but all three must work together. They should speak to each other closely. So if we want to learning intervention to scale with quality, so the first for policy, I think the for the policy maker, I think the most important recommendation is to embed TaL and foundational learning within the formal education system. So this means that including it in the academic calendar, school timetable, our sector plan, budget. So the evidence from Sindh clearly shows that timing matters, as mentioned by Kanzabi, that, for example, cohort 1, which was implemented in the first half of the academic year, performed the strongest. Later cohort faced exams, holidays, weather disruptions, teachers' deputation, and shortened school times. Implementation time should not be negotiated school by school or cohort by cohort. So it should be protected through the system. It should be there. I think for me, it should be there in the scheme of studies, maybe. Secondly, for the policy makers, I think they must establish dedicated budget lines for foundational learning and TaL. We have policy commitment and formal endorsement, but real sustainability will come only when these commitments are reflected in the budget. A dedicated budget line sends a strong signal that foundational learning is not optional. It is a core responsibility of the education system. Thirdly, policymakers should integrate TaL assessment into EMIS. This is essential for monitoring. So if you want to scale, we need real-time or routine data on children learning levels, not only enrollment and infrastructural data. Learning data should guide district reviews, regular reviews, right? School support, teacher mentoring, and provincial planning. Fourth, I think policymakers must protect the human resource investment already made. The 62 government master trainers and the trained teachers are not just numbers, so they are in system resource for foundational learning. So if they are transferred, overburdened, or not activated, the system will lose valuable capacity, and we need retention, recognition, and deployment mechanism for them. For practitioners, my first recommendation is to give dedicated implementation time. TaL definitely requires focus. It cannot be squeezed into random free periods teachers, or at the same time, we also need to balance intensity with curricular activities. School heads themselves have indicated that 2 hours per day can be disruptive in mainstream school settings. So the model must be adaptive carefully while maintaining quality. Then I think make had teachers the anchors of the study strategy. The implementation evidence was very clear, right? Where head teachers were active, children progressed. Where school leadership was weak or overburdened, progress was limited. So head teachers' orientation, ownership, and accountability should be built into every scale-up plan. Then the practitioners, I think, should formalize teacher support and motivation. In one of the cohorts, teacher motivation became a visible challenge when experienced teachers were asked to participate again without additional recognition. So this is not an individual issue, it is a system issue. And teachers need mentoring, appreciation, recognition where possible, incentives maybe for additional efforts. Then practitioners should deliberately use spillover effect. In several school, non-TaRL teachers began, adopting the approach after seeing it in classrooms, and students who supported peer learning. So this is a very powerful and low-cost way to strengthen scale. But it should be designed intentionally through peer learning, school-based sharing, and demonstration in classrooms. For developing partners, my strongest recommendation is that fund government ownership, not parallel systems. This is my strongest recommendation for the development partners. That the lesson from Sindh is that durability comes when partners strengthen the existing public systems rather than creating separate delivery structures. So partners should invest in long-term capacity, government-led training system, EMIS integration, assessment systems, and evidence generation. Secondly, development partners, I think, should support long horizon partnerships. Institutionalizing a learning approach does not happen in one project cycle. It takes time to build trust, evidence, government ownership, policy alignment, and implementation capacity. So the journey of TaRL in Sindh shows that sustainable scale requires patience and continuity. Thirdly, partners should coordinate through existing government forums, especially the technical working groups, as more organizations work on foundational learning. So there is always a risk of overlap, duplication, or dilution of the model. So coordination is essential to maintain quality and avoid these fragmented implementation approaches. So overall, my recommendation is simple. Scaling is not only about reaching more children. It is about building a system that can continue the work after the project ends. So that means policy alignment, then protected financing, trained human resources, strong school leadership, learning data, similarly teacher motivation, and coordinated partnerships. So if these elements are in place, TaRL and similar foundational learning intervention can actually move from successful pilots to system-wide reforms. So yeah, thank you. Over to you, Dr. Saiba.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fazia. That this knowledge is extremely useful, pertinent for these groups, and makes absolute sense. It seems like an uphill task. However, I guess if it has to be done properly, we need to look into all these areas. So we'll now immediately shift to the audience, and we already have a question in the chat box. Please feel free to share your queries with us at this point. And also, there is this QR code being displayed on screen. Kindly scan it and share your feedback with us via the feedback form. So we have a question from Claudine Rizkala Aziz. I'll just read it out. How to balance between embedding TaRL in the calendar and timetable while maintaining the flexibility of the program design and its adaptability to different needs and contexts. A valid question. So who would like to take it? maybe you could, Kanza, or maybe, okay, Kanza. So yeah, please.
Hi. So thank you so much for this question. And it's a really, really good question. Basically, what we need is we need around 60 days for the implementation of teaching at the right level. If it's implemented, maybe 2 to 3 hours per day. So for this implementation, it was 2 hours per day. And what we have now in our policies is a dedicated sort of reading hour within the foundational learning policies. For example, TaRL was also teaching at the right level was also recently implemented or piloted in Balochistan in 3 different districts. Their teachers could not do 2 to 3 hours per day. They were having some trouble adjusting that within the timetable, but they had a mandatory reading hour that was included in their timetable. So what they decided, and this was a strategy that we came up with, the officials, district officials, including teachers and head teachers, is that they would implement teaching at the right level 1 hour per day during that reading hour. So instead of doing the regular 60-day cycle of teaching at the right level, they you could do it for 120 days, but they did it for a little less than that. And the beauty of teaching at the right level is, the camps can sort of continue by cohort. So if a child has only been able to move from beginner level to, let's say, word level or sentence level and has not yet reached the story or comprehension level, they can just resume teaching at the right level at the next camp cycle or the next cohort that will be embedded within the academic year, and they can continue that learning from there. So these are some of the lessons that we've learned throughout our experience of implementing teaching at the right level in different contexts. If anyone else, Ms. Bela or Dr. Fawzia, if they want to come in, um, I think that
Yeah.
would be nice.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kanza. So, just responding to or adding to what just Kanza said, that in Sindh we have these reading periods mentioned in our scheme of study, and what we are proposing is, and what we have done in the past also, is that utilizing those reading periods for this specific intervention. Yeah. Thank you. Over to you.
There's a question which sort of looks at, okay, what are the materials? The resources that were used are very simple. The resources were used for, these were books for children. These were practice books for each of the three subjects. Then there were lots of low-cost learning materials that were there for the classroom. And they were to be used for each of those, whether it was Hindi and Urdu, whether it was numeracy, whether it was English. And they were displayed everywhere in the classroom. So it was a pretty print-rich classroom with a monitoring M&E chart displaying the name of every child and where the child was at for the baseline, midline, and end line. And they could see the child move on. So the materials, as I said, are very simple. There are manuals for the teachers approved by STADA. There's content approved by DCAR, and there were PITE trainers, again, selected by PITE for that particular district. And they have a pretty good list of trainers, and we were very impressed by those. So the regular textbooks are, we feel that only when the children are able to do basic literacy and numeracy, they can get to the textbooks and they move it through it pretty fast, pretty fast. And it was amazing to see it. And the teachers were encouraged to look at the child who may be lagging far behind or not getting it right the first time. What was nice to see, people rallying around the teacher, the other students rallying around the students so that till she got it right. I often sat where the child was having the most difficulty in numeracy or literacy, and we need to become more conscious of it in the second or third or new iterations of TAL. We need to see where do the children get more stuck and how to address those particular, is it at the number level? Is it at the operational level? If at the operational level, where? Or is it at the sentence level? Is it the content? So I think we need to do more introspective work on the content constantly, and it should not be one size fit all. There are others who are also looking at technology solutions and so on. And I think We are not averse to that. The government is not averse to that. In fact, government is doing many initiatives as far as that is concerned. But we do need to be caring people for our children, for the teachers, for the parents and the community, families as well, because we're beginning to see a lot of parent engagement. However, I must say in this particular segment, we were not we did not have an intensive engagement with the SMCs or the parents. They were coming, they were asking questions, but if one said, okay, if we were to do different, we would definitely have this connection between home and school. And because there's so much of TaRL happening inside the house as well, what can we do more to bring, this gap closer so parents also know how to do TaRL?
Sounds
But
good.
it's
Thank you so
60
much.
days. It's 60
60
days,
days.
no more.
So we have four more questions. I'll just immediately run over them since we have 5 minutes left, if that is okay. Thank you, Ms. Bela, Dr. Fauzi Kanza, for all responses, and hopefully Claudine and Sharmeen, your queries are answered. So we have a question about how can the sustainability of TaRL be ensured in the absence of a monitoring system? Not too sure what this means, Mirza Mohammed Bilal, but would anyone want to take up this question? Absence of a monitoring system. Or we can just move to the next question.
No, so they're monitoring. No, it's a very good question.
Okay.
So there is an internal monitoring system which is taking place all the time, and that data is being uploaded, which is looking at learning. But I think what is important is that in the monthly monitoring tools that we have, SELD has as well. And if we have the annual school census, it would be good to see, because annual school centers is taking a snapshot of the system level, what is there, what is not there. But the monthly M&E system could easily have a few questions which are relating to it. Other provinces have started putting it there. Maybe we can think in terms of that too, because that will help to say that, TaRL is there, and how to, maybe Dr. Fauziya can then supplement it.
Yeah. So just to add, Bella, so we are actually already working on this area. We have this M&E system, and we are trying to incorporate these indicated, because right now, if you look at to our the structure of our M&E directorate, it is more related to accessibility factor. So we are on it. We are developing these indicators related to the quality, and one of the area is specifically related to FL. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. So hopefully, Bilal, your query has been responded to. Dr. 𝐖𝐞𝐻𝐚 has a question. Appreciation to DARE RCs in the Education Department, IT and partners to share evidence on FL and TaRL. My question is about scalability and sustainability. So national and international evidence shared evidence which normally do not coincide with the project findings. On various education indicators, Pakistan slipped down despite the successful interventions. Okay, so the question would be, who would like to respond to this? I think the query is that how come there is a discrepancy uh, between what international evidence says and what the project is saying?
Oh, the international evidence is saying exactly the same thing. Dr. 𝐖𝐞𝐻𝐚, I'm just sitting here in Senegal. Everyone, I think, of great importance is sitting right here in Africa. And basically, that's what they're saying, that if this is working, how do you scale it up? And I think what is good about this is that this has been done by government's own teachers in government's own schools. These are not separated camps outside the school time. It is during the school time in everything. And so please do have a look at it. And as I said, it would be great to see how we bring in children with disabilities as well in this. But the international evidence is pointing towards exactly the same thing everywhere. Today, TaRL is happening in Latin America, in Africa, in Asia, and each time this is saying it, whether it's looking at through RCTs or other possibilities as well. And here, by the way, cohort 2 was the subject of the evaluation, which is very unusual, but cohort 2, and we were happy because it could give us very hardcore evidence. And by the way, the assessment tool, like another question being asked is, the assessment tool is the same. It is the ASER tool. It is a basic TaRL tool, very simple, and we'll send you the copies of that. Maybe Kanza can start sending some of the links as well. But there, it's very simple, and the same tool is used for every child from grades 3 to 5. And sometimes older children who are stuck in grade 2 also become part of the TaRL remedial support. So the evidence is becoming strong everywhere. And we can send you some of the studies from around the world. That's the beauty of it.
Thank you so much, Ms. Vela. So I hope, Dr. Saigam, your query has been responded to. Okay, so we have questions by Farman. How to deal with the given syllabus during the implementation of TaRL? And I think a connected question, which I'll also read out. How come schools start TaRL when the day has to cover the syllabus of 8 subjects, having 30 minutes for each in a class, having strength of 60 to 100 in Sindh? Are we supposed to redesign the course up to 4 subjects per day?
So one of good things are happening, and I think Dr. Fawzia will bear me out, and maybe Kanza too. Just very quickly, by the way, there are not 8 subjects. There are too many subjects. Also for grades 3, for 4 and 5, there are 6 if you include Nazra, which Sindh is not really included, including all of that. But yes, there is a way to be able to manage. So you are covering 3 subjects in 2 hours. So you have to, and that's why I think Kanza said, if you do it at the beginning, the first 6 months of your academic year, or, your first 2 months, and then 2 months, immediately after the holidays, it's the best time. But I'll stop there because Kanza wanted to say same thing. Maybe Dr. Fawzia can say something, because also we are looking at curriculum rationalization, bringing that down. And all SLOs, Iram asked that question, all the SLOs are mapped to up to grade 3 level here.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to add, because all of the other points, the technical points have been covered by Dr. Fawzia and Ms. Pela as well. I just want to add that one thing that really motivated the teachers as well as the students was the fact that these are foundational literacy and numeracy skills for upper primary grades, right? For kids between the grades of 3 to 5, in some cases grade 2 as well. Now, if these kids are in these grades and they cannot even, for example, identify letters or read words or read sentences, they are very, very most likely, struggling in their other subjects as well, in their regular sort of schooling situation. So if we are bringing these kids up to at least the foundational literacy and numeracy level, they can sort of self-lead within the classroom as well. They can self-lead at home as well in terms of learning. So the fact that to drive home is that these kids need those foundational skills in order to progress at higher levels of learning as well. So this is something that's very, very important to communicate to all of the stakeholders, all of the partners of this teaching at the right level implementation.
Thank you so much. So we have overrun the time, but we can just take another question. Dr. Julia is basically asking, do you imagine that TaRL would need to continue to be a part of the education system in medium to longer term, or is the value primarily shorter term? How long would an individual school continue to implement TaRL for?
Dr. Fawzia?
So who would like to take this question? Okay, Kansa.
I can start, and then if Dr. Fawzia or Ms. Bila want to come in. So, we have results in front of us. We can see the results from the ASER survey as well, that kids that are in grades 3 to 4 particularly, they struggle quite a bit in foundational literacy and numeracy skills. So looking at the evidence, teaching at the right level should be a longer term intervention, implementation, so that all of the kids who are fallen behind within their schooling system, within the existing grades, they can sort of catch up to the learning levels that they're supposed to be at in terms of the grades they're in. So our aspiration and vision for this, and this is SELD's aspiration and vision as well, that this needs to be a longer term intervention, and that's why we're looking at scalability and sustainability. That's why we have master trainers who have gone through very intensive trainings. That's why there's a cohort of 560 teachers, so that all of that wisdom and that knowledge can be retained for the continuation of this intervention.
Thank you, Kansa.
So,
And
sorry,
yes, please
just
continue.
one point, adding to what Kanza said for CLD, clearly it is not just a project intervention for us. It is, a key player and we want to implement it in a proper structured way. So clearly it is not a one-time project intervention for a CLD. Thank you.
Perfect. Excellent. So, Manise Banu is asking, where can one access training manuals and materials? Um, who
May I,
would respond to
may I
this?
just suggest that so we have our teams in Manish I think, based out of Islamabad. We have a whole team sitting in Islamabad, and where this has been used for impact, with the British Council. I would urge that maybe, I'd let Manize approach them, send an email, and also to our teams there. They'd be happy to, maybe to hold a kind of a day-long session. Maybe their RC can help out. Maybe Zegam Saab can, the ministry can, and be happy to share all the materials on TaRL and what the methodology is. Then, of course, just wanted to say there's nothing light about TaRL. So TaRL may look very simple at the front, but the back end is pretty complex and very disciplined, and routines are important. So I think what is important is to see that even if there was a 6-day training, they have to do a 30-hour practicum so that they practice it before they actually go in front of a TAL class. Now, that is a very important quality control measure, because the same teacher has to not just be the deliverer of the material, but has to really get the evidence from assessment and then be able to place the child at the level of the child. So we are getting away from grade and age to the level of the learning of the child. And the teacher has to become adept at it. Looking at data, trying to see, oh, this child that I thought would be able to read a book cannot. The child is still stuck at the word level. The teacher has to go back to that. And without getting flustered, the teacher will have to build that skill. Therefore, what we haven't talked about, that which, because in Sindh these things were up, the TOs are not sufficient, and they're not, but many TOs were apart. The Tehsil education, Taluka education officers were there. In Punjab, there are AEOs, in KP also others, and in Balochistan. But where you need coaches around, or coordinators who will become the support group for the teacher. So those were almost one per every 8 to 10 schools, and they became your, there were WhatsApp groups. They could come and help you. They could support you. So, um, yes, if you're in Lahore, you can have our teams do it there, and even the governments and British Council teams. And similarly, in Islamabad, if you have people from KP and Islamabad, we can do it there. The government in Sindh, actually, they can have the government, some of the teachers, actually, they're brilliant at and doing a great job. The master trainers are doing, I mean, I was so impressed to see how nicely they were handling the most complex issues, and how fast the children were able, and they were making their own low cost materials. They were coming up with their own solutions, and I loved that, because they could see they could solve the problem through another solution and another solution. And I love the innovations there. That's another whole game that needs to be, area that needs to be covered too.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bela. So basically, we need to wind up the webinar. We have a few questions, comments coming up, but I would recommend to please share them as part of the feedback form. There is a place over there to share your questions, and we can respond to them, our participants. And thank you to all our panelists. Dr. Fawzia Khan, thank you for your time. I know you're very busy and really appreciate your contribution towards this webinar. Thank you so much, Ms. Bela. It's always a pleasure to hear you out. And thank you so much, Kanza, for all your efforts, and to the Dear RC team. So we will continue this conversation or probably over next series of webinars. Thank you so much for the participants, for the very interesting comments and queries. And yes, take care, all of you. Have a nice day, and do fill up the feedback
Yes.
form and share your comments with us further on.
And
Thank you,
this has
everyone.
had 4 evaluations done. So please, we'll be happy to share that with you as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.